G'day there, trendsetters. This is take 2 of a Jew talking about kimchi, Purim, IFS, and marriage. Now, I had a whole spiel, but it got deleted for some reason, so I'm going to have to bring you back up to speed. Making kimchi for shalach manos. These are gifts that we give to one another on Purim. This recipe is based on Will Young. Check out his cooking channel. It's amazing. I'll try to put a link in the description. Great recipe, easy. This is overnight. We're going to let it ferment, then in the fridge. I'm going to put it in jars, give it to mates and friends, and fulfill the mitzvah. So I think this is delicious, very tasty, really fun to make, and not too overwhelming. We've got 2 heads of Napa cabbage. You salt them with about 2 tablespoons per head of Napa cabbage, 1 box for those playing at home in Australia. Soak them in a bowl. Follow the recipe on William. I just kind of put it in a massive bowl, put another bowl on top of it with water to weigh it down, and then a lot of liquid came out. I rinsed that really well, drained that really well in a bowl. To that, I also added some mandolin carrots, some shredded carrots with like a thin grater, and some shredded and chopped white radish, spring onion, and red radish, a bunch of red radish. This is going to make a nice, really big bunch. Then I added basically the kimchi mix. Will Young has a great shortcut where he uses steamed rice instead of rice flour mixed with water on a stove. I think that's a great shortcut. I threw in some apple there. That's my touch. Bit of soy sauce, sugar, salt, a lot of ginger, a lot of garlic, and vegan fish sauce for some really added umami and depth of flavor. Of course, the original recipe has a lot of shrimp paste and fermented stuff like that. So that's kind of going to give it the herald and the salute to the traditional recipe. Of course, this is a real rustic kind of adaptation. So then we've got Gochugaru, which is Korean chili flake. Check with your local kosher authority. I called up mine. They said dried, roasted, plain spices, which are 100% spices, are kosher. So in this case, I could get this. Of course, in the States, North America, you can easily get one with a hechsher on it. So this is about 4 tablespoons per head of Napa cabbage. Of course, this is not precise, a lot of feeling, a lot of passion going into here. So we're putting this on, and we're going to mix it with our hands. And I'm wearing gloves because it's going to be spicy and burny and also a bit discoloring. So look at that there, that's going to look really nice when we mix it. And then after we've mixed it, we just put it in the container, leave it overnight, and then put it into jars, and it can ferment in the fridge. You can eat, it's ready the next day, but as it ferments more, it's going to get more flavor. So speaking of flavor and Purim and fermentation, let's discuss a bit of the ideas behind Purim, which I believe have a lot to do with understanding the feminine energy in a relationship and the feminine energy in all of us, because as we all know, every individual has both masculine and feminine energy. As it says in Bereshis, Zachar or Nekeva bara otam. In Genesis, male and female, he created them. We have the energies of giving, which is a more masculine energy, and an energy of receiving, Kabbalah, to receive, that's feminine. And Purim is known as Man Kabbalah Torah, the time of receiving the Torah, which the giving of the Torah and the receiving of the Torah is an allegory for a relationship, a marriage, a bond, a union. And that union is the marriage between Hashem, God, and the Jewish people. The wedding contract, the ketubah, is the Torah. So we have this idea that on Purim, the Jewish people, at threat of violence and genocide and persecution and extermination, they took it upon themselves to say, no, we're going to stand up for what we believe, and we're going to fight, and we're going to stand up for our values, and we're going to stand up for our traditions, and we're going to stand up for our relationship with God, and we're going to fight for it. So in doing that, that was the reception, that was the vessel of receiving of the Jewish people getting in touch with their feminine energy. And as we look at the story of Purim, what we see is really that it's all about the feminine. The central figures of Purim are the heroines. They're the female figures. Queen Esther, it's called Megillas Esther, the Scroll of Esther. But there are also 2 other great players. I'm not going to go into in too much depth in this one. And they are Vashti and Haman's wife. Haman's wife has the greatest, most accurate prophetic statement to Haman when he says, I'm going to try and knock off the Jewish people. She says, if Mordechai is the seed of the Jewish people, you will not succeed, you will surely fail. That was prophetic. And that was amazing. I'm going to go on a tangent right now. And that is really the message to Amalek and all of the Jew haters out there, that you will not ultimately succeed. You are doomed for failure. And what's quite ironic is that the book of Esther is canonized in both, in the Christian Bible. It's there. It's one of the holy books from the Old Testament. And I was reading in Albert Schurer's The Rise and the Fall of the Third Reich, where there were some churches in Nazi Germany where they combined the book of Mein Kampf and the Bible, which would have included the Old Testament and no doubt would have included the book of Esther. So you had Mein Kampf, Hitler's work, and all of his nasty Amalek plots and plans, which ultimately failed. And in it, sandwiched in that book that they had in their church, was the prophecy of their ultimate failure and demise, with the archetypal Amalek, Haman, and his wife, who said, you're doomed for failure. You're going to start, you're going to fail. So that's a message. Now, talking about Amalek, we're going to go on another tangent. Amalek comes from the root Amel. It's a burden. And so there is a physical Amalek there that poses a physical existential threat to the Jewish people. We've seen it. But there's also an inner Amalek in all of us that we have to get rid of, that we have to unburden, to get rid of that Amel, that burden that we're carrying, and which is holding our inner exiles. These are the inner traumas, the serious survival situations, which can lead to, oh, that's interesting. Ooh. Oh man. Oh, okay. We're still going. Siri just got on for some reason. No, we're still going. Cool. Sorry for that interruption, trendsetters. We'll see how this records. If it's not meant to be, it's not meant to be. We'll try again another time. So, we're a bit slanted here. That's all right. Look at this. Look at the color. Look at the color. Look at that. That's looking gorgeous. So we're just mixing that. It's almost done. But it smells fantastic. I unfortunately can't try it. It's a fast day today. So we've got to get rid of our inner Amaleks. We've got to get rid of the burdens that we carry. And I believe one of the best methodologies for doing that is internal family systems. It's a set of tools and a way of understanding your inner psychology that you can do with a practitioner, or you can do on yourself, or you can do with a guided meditation of unburdening stuff. And of course, some burdens are very intense and difficult, and they might need real expert guidance and help, and that should be looked at. So coming back to, we've got to get rid of Amalek. But coming back to the feminine, the story of Purim starts with Vashti and all the ladies having a party and the men having a party, and they don't want to meet. They're separated, as it were. Achashverosh comes and says, I want Vashti to come. I want the feminine energy in the relationship to receive. And what we need to also understand is that when somebody gives, when somebody's tapping into their masculine energy to give love, and somebody's receiving that love, when the receiver receives it, they are also giving a tremendous sense of gratitude and fulfillment to the giver. So there's this kind of virtuous cycle of give and take, receive and give, which happens. And this is a system that we see between us and Hashem. He gives to us and we receive, and in receiving, we elevate Hashem. And so too, on a certain level, per the Leich HaDodi Maimon, when we do mitzvahs and Torah and connect to God, and He makes Himself vulnerable to receive, tapping into that feminine energy of Hashem, the Shekhinah, that's the feminine energy, that brings about an elevation in all of the creation. And so that, as it were, is a giving to the receiver. So this kind of virtuous cycle happens in a marriage, but often it can be interrupted, because just as in the Hashem's energy, sometimes it's the feminine aspect in us that gets exiled, just as the Shekhinah is exiled. There's the capacity to receive love can sometimes be, undermined. It can be hurt. It can be vulnerable. It can become an inner exile, and then we can have protectors surrounding it to protect it from being hurt again. And that makes sense when we all grow up with attachment injuries on some level. To paraphrase Robert Bly, nobody gets out of childhood without a wound that cuts to the core. And we all have to deal with that. And marriage, relationship, is the playground where, and the laboratory, and sadly sometimes the battleground, where we go through this healing. To quote Harville Hendricks from the Imago therapy, we are conceived in relationship, we are wounded in relationship, and ultimately we are healed in relationship. So coming back to Purim, there's tremendous great energy and story there in understanding the feminine energy. So we've got Queen Vashti, who said, I'm not ready to receive. It created tremendous protector anxiety and anger, ultimately murderous rage in Achashverosh. That led to her downfall, her death, and then her replacement. And her replacement is Queen Esther. And what happens with Queen Esther? We fast forward to, I'm looking at my Tanakh here, chapter 5, verse 3, where Queen Esther has to make herself vulnerable to approach the king, to receive from him. And what she needs is to receive him interceding on her behalf and arranging this banquet, which ultimately, brings about the redemption of the Jewish people. But in a way, it's almost a redo of the relationship between the masculine and the feminine, where before, at the start, the masculine and the feminine are stuck in their distrust, they're stuck in their protective parts, where the feminine doesn't want to approach the masculine. The receiver does not want to receive the giver's love. And we're not talking, any relationship, both parties give and receive. Both parties have the male and female energy. I want to make that very clear. And there's that dance, and that give and take, and that solar system of revolving around and gravitational pull. It's an internal family system, and with an external manifestation in the family system of a relationship. So, coming back to it, there are some very profound words that are given when, as it were, this relationship between the masculine and feminine is rectified. Where at the beginning we see that when the masculine and feminine energy is too protector driven, elements are exiled. We basically get conflict, which results in death. This is why marriage is described as a battleground. Jerry Seinfeld talks about it. There's a great Mexican proverb where that marriage is the only war where you sleep with the enemy. And there can be a time where we're not re'im ahovim, we're not loving friends, we're actually, unfortunately, warring parties. Which, unfortunately is an element of the Ezer Kenegdo. That's another vort, where there is an idea of, in the terms of Rashi, lilachembo, to fight. There's going to be conflict. But this conflict can lead to healing, because the conflict, whenever protectors arise, this is a trailhead to explore. The tragedy is, too often when we fight, and when we hurt or hurt each other, we get stuck with the arrowheads instead with the trailheads. When there's, excuse me, I'm feeling a bit emotional. That's fine. When there's hurt and vulnerability, this is something to get explored. This is something to go, let me make the U-turn. Let me look within to my protective parts. And what are the vulnerable parts? What are the inner burdens, the amel that I'm holding? And can I elevate them? And can I unburden them and redeem them? So that message is brought beautifully in this one pasuk, chapter 5, verse 3. Check it out if you want. Where Esther approaches Achashverosh, seeking him to give something to her. And what does he say? He says beautiful words. I'm trying to find it in the Hebrew so I can read it and not get it wrong. V'yomer he says to her, HaMelech, the king, Malach Esther HaMalka. What's with you? This is the most important question whenever we have an interaction. We have to have a curiosity. We have to have a compassionate inquiry. We have to also understand that we don't always understand what our spouse really wants. So there's a curiosity, Malach, what's with you? And then more words, Uma vakashatech. So it's like, where are you coming from? And then what are your requests? And if I have that curiosity, and if the individual can kind of say, I've got this part of me that feels X. And that's why from you right now I need Y. Or I have this part that's going on, and we both have to say, Malach, what's going on? And what's going on lach with the self-energy in us? Because maybe that's also been pushed to a side because parts have become blended. There's more. Because this is the beautiful part. Achashverosh comes and says, Ad chatzi hamalchut vayinaten lach. I can give you half the kingdom. And this is the truth in a relationship. That yes, marriage is 100-100. But in terms of making a U-turn, we can only go halfway. Meaning I can make a U-turn, but I can't force the other party to make a U-turn. They have to do their own healing. All we can do is do our own healing, create enough space with enough self-energy, hopefully, so that when we can then approach any interaction, we can come from the level of malach. Where are you coming from? What's going on? And what do you want? But realizing that we can only do our own best to create an unburdened inner system. It's never going to be perfect. Lo alecha malacha ligmor. We're not going to finish the job, but we can neither quit the job. We can do the internal work, the internal rectification, and hopefully we can react. Instead of with protective, warlike parts in chapter 1, we can have more interacting, loving, compassionate, giving and receiving parts of chapter 5, which is heading to the climax of the book of Esther. And in that, we can help facilitate the U-turn in the other party. But each party can only do their half, their self-work. But when both parties are making the U-turn, looking within, going to trailheads instead of arrowheads, then and only then will you have the union of masculine and feminine in our inner systems, and then the masculine and feminine in a relationship. And then through that, we can have healing and redemption, giving and receiving, which will ultimately bring about the redemption within our individuals, the individual selves, the redemption in our homes, the redemption in societies, and the redemption in the world as a whole. This kimchi, I reckon, is beautifully done. I'm going to put it in a bowl, big bowl, let it ferment overnight, and then put it in little jars and give it to people. I hope this has given you some food for thought, something flavorful to ponder on over Purim. And that compassionate curiosity, that was my big revelation last Purim. At the end of the day, I don't know. We all have to come and say, you know what, we think we know our spouse. We think we know ourselves, but we don't. We always have to come from that level of malach. What's going on? What's going on with you? What's your request? And we need to talk that way to our inner parts, and also talk with that compassionate curiosity to our spouses. And with that, we can come from a state of unknowing to a greater sense of knowing, and then connection. So wishing you a happy Purim, a lot of celebration, a lot of joy, a lot of revealed good, and we need a lot of peace right now, and a lot of inner peace and a lot of outer peace. So good luck to you all. Hope you're all good, staying well, staying healthy. Yalla, bye.